Hello and welcome to Beyond Graves and Stars. My name's Andy Martin. I'm a movie enthusiast, really into my horror and sci-fi, mainly horror, I have got to say. But in this new series of podcasts, I'm going to be focusing on some weird movies, mainly franchises and remakes, if I'm honest. I'm a big fan of what is sort of known as the NAF horror sequel, and I love it when a series goes on for 8-9 films. I find it interesting how sometimes the movies are up and down, how they deteriorate, how they used to go straight to video from what started on this classic movie will then deteriorate. But I always find something to enjoy in these movies, or often find something to enjoy in these movies. So I want to sort of dissect a lot of them, so to speak, with guests and friends, and show some who haven't seen the movies before to see what they think of them, and just basically see if I can find more sort of gems in these movies, because so often they're slated. But yeah, when I talk to people, like being a massive fan of Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, so many of us love these sequels, and I think it never takes anything away from the original, no matter how much better the original is than some of the sequels. So I'm going to start, and this is the first part of a two-part special, so to speak, on the Candyman franchise, which it's kind of appropriate because sadly we lost the lead, Tony Todd, last year. So I want to start with that. And in this first episode, James Rowe from King Street Cinema in Ipswich will be joining me. He's a massive fan of the first movie, but has never seen any of the rest. So we're going to talk about the first film and then talk about it's kind of the fourth film, but it's more of a reboot, reimagining follow-up, which came out a few years ago. He'd never seen that one, so it's great to talk to him about the original and then see what his thoughts are on this newer one he hasn't seen. And then shortly after, maybe in a week or so, I'll release the second part where we discuss parts 2 and 3. Both of these movies got critically panned, but do have a fan base and have had recent reissues on Blu-ray with lots of special features and stuff. The third one actually went straight to video, so that's quite interesting. I think James was kind of put off watching these ones because of his love for the first one so much. So I'd like to thank him for watching them, and interesting to see his reaction to them. So that bit's coming up now. I will be focusing on other little things on the show as well, talking about newer movies and things like that. But this being the first episode, just after that main bit where we talk about Candyman, I'll just be back to do a quick summary actually of my top 5 horror films so far this year. I know we're only in February, but there's been a lot. So here's me and James Rowe talking about Candyman and the follow-up movie a few years later, also called Candyman. Candyman, 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 Candyman. I'm not going to do it.
It's no mirrors.
No mirrors. Well, how do people don't know that? James, thank you for joining me. We're going to tackle the Candyman franchise.
We are.
All 4 movies. In this first episode, we will focus on the original 1992 classic and the sequel, continuation, reboot from 2021.
Yes.
Is that how you describe it?
I'd just say it's a sequel. But if other people want to call it a reboot as well as a sequel, and I mean, in a way, it's kind of like it's revitalizing it because it's been a long time between the third film and this one.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. But we'll start with just talking about the first one. We want to explore more the sequels, to be honest, because the first one is a classic, bona fide classic.
Yeah.
But to set the tone, we'll talk about the first movie. Released, as I just said, in 1992. What are your first memories of this film? When did you first see it?
I'd say I saw it, I reckon, either 95, 96 time. So I'm like 13, 14. I reckon I'm about 14 years old when I first see it.
Yeah.
Known about it since primary school.
Yeah.
So kids used to talk about it. So it comes out in 92. And I'm out of primary school in 93. And I remember in my last year of primary school, kids are talking about it loads. They're talking about saying his name 5 times, all that. So already the urban legend has now become a thing that we're all doing. We're all doing the urban legend now in real life, which is great, right? Because that's the whole point, or at least half of the point of the film. Yeah. So yeah, that's my first memories of it, are being told about this thing. Don't say Candyman 5 times in the mirror. See the film a few years later. Love it. It's one of my favourite horror films of all time.
Cool. So we've got the right person
Yes.
for this podcast. That might be why we've done it. Could you quickly do a summarise?
Yeah, sure. I think so. Yeah. So we follow in the first film. Our protagonist is Helen Lyle, who is a graduate student in the University of Chicago, and she is studying. I'm going to say I think it's called semiotics, which is kind of the study of signs and meaning between. So it's kind of like a thing about humans, a study of humans and why we sort of do and believe the kind of things that we do, and the connections between us, all those kind of things. It gets very complicated, really. But in this, her thesis is on urban legends. So she's been interviewing, along with her friend Bernadette, so they're doing the thesis together. They've been interviewing loads of people about urban legends, about their grown, the stories that they've heard, and this story of Candyman comes up. First, we're hearing it from different people to who we sort of follow in throughout the story. So that's important because it shows us that the idea of the Candyman isn't just necessarily located in from one location, though we do end up in one location, which is called I forget what it's called now. I think it's I can never say the word. Caprini Green, that's it. Which was a real, still is a real location in Chicago, but was a real housing project that they filmed in at the time. So low, cost housing, predominantly African American. So the story is that Candyman is a guy who was killed in the 1800s because he had an affair or fell in love with a white lady. And of course, it's a very much taboo thing at the time. And the people of the town or the area chased him down the street, killed him, put a rusty hook on his arm, and burnt him. And it was in the location, or at least as far as we're told in this story, in Caprini Green. And as the years go by, different horrible things that happen in this area become related to him, as in people believe that these horrible things that are happening, as in murders, are happening because of the Candyman who's coming back and getting revenge. And the idea for his existence, as it were, being able to come back, is the fear that people have in him. So the belief that people have in this existence of this entity are what feeds his existence. Yeah. So it's kind of like a feedback loop kind of thing, which is really interesting. I like that as a story, as a plot device very much. So yeah, and so that's kind of like the plot of like why we get into the whole thing. And then there's the furthering on, the other side of the story, which is that Candyman is looking for his love, ultimately, the person that that he ultimately died for. And Helen is considered in the film, implied but never necessarily said, as a reincarnation of this woman that he fell in love with.
Yeah, and kind of Beauty and the Beast vibes.
Absolutely,
as well.
It's very gothic. Yeah. That side of the story, which is for me like the heart and soul of Candyman, is completely goth horror, right?
Yeah, it's like a modern goth.
Yeah, absolutely, completely.
And I love the way the movie starts. That's the score. You'll know straight away his name. You've done the
Philip Glass.
The way it starts is the music is just so gothic is the word I'd say, and a shot above the roads of the city, and it just looks and sounds beautiful, really. Yeah, it's a great way, and it sets the tone straight away. It's that urban.
Yeah, so we've got the urban sprawl of Chicago. Again, everything's shot on location in Chicago. We get a real essence of where we are. Again, that's another beautiful thing about, like you say, this wonderful moving aerial shot with the music playing, gives us a great sense of location and feel and tone of the film. Right from the get-go, we're feeling already what we're in for. And a wonderful thing about it, being that it is the beginning of the 90s, is that this does not feel like the 80s. No, this does not feel like a 80s horror film. This feels like something new. This doesn't even really feel like a horror film, at least in the sense of what we've seen recently in the last decade. Yeah. Right. We got something new coming along. Even though the story, like I say, harkens back to and I think in a wonderful way, gothic horror, it is, like you said, very modern.
Yeah. And interestingly, with Philip Glass, he He didn't do film scores, did he? He was a composer.
Mostly, sure, for the most part. I mean, Koyo Gatsi, which is a film that came out in '82, he did the soundtrack for that, and I'm sure he's done a few others. But those are the two that I know very well.
Because he basically was stated he didn't want to do film soundtracks, and he was talked into doing this by the director, who we'll talk about soon, Bernard Rose.
Yeah.
And apparently Glass wasn't happy that in his a run-the-mill kind of slasher film, which I don't think it is.
Not at all.
But I think he thought it was going to be a lot artier.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a cross of the two.
Sure.
For me, I'd say, and when you look at the sequels, which we talk about mainly in the next episode, the more straight after sequels, the studio was pushing it to be like the next Freddy. Yeah. Which in a way it was.
Oh yeah, we must not in any kind of way pretend that Candyman is not a horror icon.
Yeah.
I mean, the Candyman image, the way he looks, the weapon he uses, the way he kills, the way he appears, he is absolutely alongside Freddy and
Jason,
and the rest of it.
Yeah. And I think that's what brought it to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there was sequels, why there was a reboot, probably why we're talking about it in an early episode of this podcast. But because of the other context of the film, it is, I think it's a more, what's the word? More almost serious.
Sure.
And there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more. It's a lot more politically aware. For example,
certainly
the whole race thing, which is interesting because I don't think that was in the original short story.
No, it's not.
The Forbidden.
Yes, that's right. It's not. I mean, it's set in a completely different place, set in Liverpool originally. So I mean, yeah, but the essence of it is the same.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, we've changed class to race, even though class is still prominent in this film. It is very important that I think that Candyman is that the first original Candyman is recognised as not just being about race relations, but as much so, I think, though perhaps not touched on as well, class.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
About those that have and those that have not.
Yeah. One thing we can't really not mention is the criticism at the time for it being made pretty much mainly by white people, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
And Tony Todd seemed happy with all this in the interviews. And I think that was, I can see why it was criticised. And in the film we're talking about next, which is made by more or less all black people.
Yeah.
So, but it comes from a good place. The point, do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
For us, for two white guys, it's not really up to us to to judge that.
But ultimately, I'm only judging the movies based on the films and and then the sequels based on what I think how they connect well with the original film. Mm-hmm. I mean, intent for this movie, I can't say because I can't speak on what goes on in the minds of other people, whoever they are. I can just say what I see when I see this movie, and for me, I think this is a very clear, well put together gothic horror story with a great antagonist that I think people who of any background should look at and go, wow, yeah, he's great, he's fantastic. I mean, Tony Todd was a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
Right. Not just for this film, for many other roles he's done, but this one he's obviously known for because of how, as we say, iconic the image of him is. I mean, and he's not in it very much, so he gives this amazing presence and this force that the idea of the urban legend, the idea of the boogeyman, as it were, whoever that may be or whatever that may be, he comes across fantastically as that.
Exactly. Yeah, and in a movie that's just over an hour and a half, 1 hour 38.
Yeah,
he doesn't even appear on screen till 45 minutes through the film.
Yeah, and he's not, and again, not in it for the rest of the movie constantly.
Yeah, but you remember him,
absolutely.
And that's
how can you forget?
And I've got to go and for the next episode watch part 2 and 3. But I'm pretty sure he's on screen a lot more in those movies.
Yes,
barely in the fourth one, but there's a reason for that.
Sure,
we'll talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's iconic and. He had well over 200 credits. I mean, he died November last year, didn't he?
That's right, at the age of 69, I think.
Yeah.
So not old,
and kind of sad to see, but interesting that in an interview for the 2018 Blu-ray release, he does say that he'd done 200 roles, and he said by the third line of his obituary, they'll say the word Candyman.
Sure.
And he says he's perfectly happy with that and he's
Yeah.
proud of it.
Well, you can understand why.
Yeah, oh, yes.
I mean, this is not in any way, like I think you touched on, this is not some silly horror movie or a poorly made horror movie by any stretch. This is I think a very serious piece of work, a really interesting piece of work, which I think in a lot of ways carried on what would become known more so as more serious horror throughout the 90s and onwards, into where we take our again, I'll use the word boogeymen a bit more seriously than just someone that comes along and slices up teenagers.
Well, exactly, and this was made in '92. Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, even Michael Myers, they'd all had their bits of comebacks after, but they'd pretty much fizzled out by then. I mean, when was the final Nightmare? 93, something like that?
Final Night, yeah.
There might have been 92, but no, 91. It was the same year Freddy Mercury died.
And then there was Jason Goes to Hell the year after this one, 93.
Yeah.
Which again is different. It has a different kind of feel to the other movies, I'd say.
But I think at the time, even though it did do well, done very well, the first movie. Somewhere I've got for 8 to 9 million it made 25.8 million.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people who would have really liked the film might have actually been put off by thinking, another one of these characters, another slasher.
Absolutely. Of course.
But it got fairly good reviews, and I think word of mouth turned it round.
Yeah, and, I hope so.
It did do well.
Well, but I think critics were kind of a bit mixed on it. I know there were some that really got it, I think, and then others were like, it doesn't quite hit the mark. And I do think the racial element is certainly a factor in this. In that there are certain people, I'm sure, that feel who are very sensitive towards this being in any kind of context. Yeah. And when we're talking about black people being seen as villains, right? Yeah. I can all understand, I'm sure, how that as a very sensitive subject can be taken very much in the wrong way, in just a negative way in and of itself, right? Yeah. No matter what the film's like or what happens within the film, just the fact that you're portraying a black man as the villain can be, there are going to be people that are going to have a problem with that. Yeah, and
but it also hit nerves because it was playing on a lot of white people's fears, which shows racism.
Yeah,
absolutely. So very interesting. Then there was the criticising for the white saviour in the movie. But
I can understand that to a degree.
But for the plot to work, it has to be a white lady because of how he was killed and how it all comes around.
But the reason is because of the love affair. Because we've got to understand as well, as far as the context of the story goes, this love affair is a completely reciprocal one. This is two people, that a white woman and a black man who fell in love, had a relationship, find out later had a child as well, or she became pregnant, right? And this is a tragedy. What happens, right? Yeah. Because he is murdered primarily because he is having a relationship with a white woman. Not just because he's black, but because he's having a relationship with a white woman. And that is seen as as such an unnatural, whatever kind of, the way it's seen by the people that kill him. This is why the revenge is here. Right, yeah. It's not just the fact that he's killed because he's black. He's killed because of a love that he has for someone that he's forbidden to have to be in love with. That's crucially important for me, anyway, to the plot of the story.
Well, I think I find very interesting as well that there's a lot of scenes towards the end of the movie, especially with Kat, what showed more of the relationship between Helen and him.
Yes,
because people then were still you shouldn't do the mixed race relationship in the movie, which now, to me anyway, sounds ridiculous.
It does, doesn't it?
It really does. But that may have affected, it did affect the movie because you see less of that, and it's more hinted at that she loves him, opposed to, when they made the movie, they Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen took ballroom dancing lessons so they could bond more, and
that's right.
Very interesting. But I think we all know when you watch it what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's just I just think it's really mad. But it is 33 years old. We've got to remember that it doesn't.
I think a lot of people don't either remember or were not there. But the 90s were not a great time when it came to race relations. They weren't. No. In the same way they weren't with sexual orientation. Still,
Yeah.
you know, it took till the end of the 90s, right at the end, for that sort of, you know, those kind of elements of normal society to be even considered normal in any kind of way. It's still at the beginning of the 90s. We have this kind of very much a taboo thing that oh no, you can't be doing stories about that or putting them on screen because people just won't have it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I do want to mention. Well, we mentioned that it's based on the short story Forbidden by Clive Barker, who produced the movie as well.
He did. He executive produced the movie, gave away the rights to the story to Bernard Rose because he believed in him completely.
Yeah. But also influences from a real life murder case.
Yes.
Ruthie Mae McCoy, who was murdered in her apartment building.
That's right.
Basically, someone came through the walls and came out of the mirror.
Yeah.
It was a home invasion type burglary,
Right.
and she was shot.
Yeah.
Is what happened. And another little bit of criticism is that story is mentioned in the movie, and it was fairly recent to when it happened, about 5 years after. Some people said it was a bit too close to home.
But understandable.
Yeah, it is. And the name they used was something very close to the real name as well. I can't think of her. But it's interesting.
Ruthie, Jane, or Jean. There's changed.
Something like that. Yeah, it's Ruthie, definitely. So
it's Ruthie, and then in the film, I think is it Jean? It's either Jean or Jane. Those two names are changed.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting how they've mixed the short story with something real, and the film's evolved into what it is. I've not read the short story.
No, I mean I have. I again have not either. I have heard it being on an audiobook whilst I was doing something else, so I didn't quite take it all in.
Yeah.
But from my understanding, it is very other than obviously the changing of the location and race and stuff like that. Other than that, it's very much true to the short story.
Yeah.
The film.
And the bit what's mentioned in the film is that she rings up the police to report him as not taken seriously. Yeah. And that's another sort of almost hinted at it possibly because in real life,
yes,
it was she'd done things like this before. She had mental health
issues.
That's
right.
But it could be because of her race as well. They don't take it seriously.
That's right.
And a very good point in the movie is I've said before, but we are doing spoilers in these.
Yeah.
Virginia Madison's character is attacked, and then the police come in and arrest somebody. But and it's Bernadette, her friend, points out that it takes one white woman to be attacked, but two black people have been murdered.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything before.
Sure.
She says anything. Then
It's true.
So that's an in-your-face racial reference right there.
Yeah, sure.
And
important to remember though as well. You're absolutely right, but important to remember in the context of the story that Bernadette is a black woman.
Yes.
Affluent. Comes from clearly a position that as far as we can understand, is well spoken, highly educated, more than likely comes from an affluent background. Yeah. Is not had the experience necessarily of African American people who are growing up in Cabrini Green, right? Yeah. And I think that again is also by the way that she interacts with other black people in that area. She finds it more difficult than Helen does. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a little subtle thing, but again, talking about class over race. Right.
Yeah.
That I think she comes from a more affluent, probably even more an affluent background than Helen does.
Yeah.
Again, this is not talked about in any. This is subtext that's within the film that I think is really good, very clever.
Yeah. Yeah.
To show that it's not that we're dealing with many elements here.
Yeah. And they made her a really likeable character.
Absolutely.
Right? And in a way, she's kind of the voice of reason in the film for Helen just wanting to do all this stuff, and she's almost sort of trying to rein her in.
Yes.
But another thing I find interesting is when they go into the apartment building and look into some of the abandoned rooms, and the fear then, a lot of the fear comes from them being scared of the people in there.
Sure.
Opposed to there's that mix of
because we're at the point here in the film we're completely believing that Candyman isn't real, that he's almost a supernatural being. It's a human being. We think it's some person going around killing people.
Yeah, it's almost like she's trying to debunk the myth.
Yeah, exactly.
She's the Scully.
Yeah.
And she does remind me of Scully as well. Talked about Tony Todd. I mean, he'd done a fair few films before it. Some big ones with smaller roles like Platoon, Bird Colours, things like that. But Virginia Madison, this for me is the film she's most known for, but she'd done a lot before as well.
She had.
And overall, she's had 242 credits up to now.
Amazing.
Probably I'd have known her from Electric Dreams before this.
Yes,
She was in
yeah.
Class.
Yeah.
June. Lots of
briefly in June. Yeah.
But sort of a memorable role.
Yeah, absolutely.
She wasn't even meant to be the main character in this. It was to do with the original actress who was in a relationship with a producer or something. She knew her, and she ended up taking over because of illness or something like that. It was a sort of a last minute thing, but I think she's great in the role.
She's fantastic,
and she's very proud of the role as well. Like Tony Todd, she talks about it fondly. It says that she's been in a lot of not so good films, Zombie High, and this is one that she's very proud of.
Yeah.
She does make a brief appearance in the later sequel. Just her voice used to be recorded.
Yeah.
And I think she carries the film very, very well.
I agree. And she's a great protagonist. You believe in her. You want to follow her. You want to find out what happens to her. Of course, we haven't got to the point yet where she's now the villain. She's become the villain of the film in the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
She's been set up by Candyman to be seen as the killer, and is seen as the killer. So this is a white lady now in a black neighborhood. Killing a dog, and stealing a child, a black child, and is because she's there found on the scene, they can just take her and say, clearly it's you. You're covered in the blood. They even catch her holding a knife and going to attack the lady whose baby has been
Vanessa Williams.
Vanessa Williams.
And she does attack her. She in sort of self-defense.
Yeah, in self-defense. So when the cops come through the door, she's in the process of basically defending herself, and looks like she's trying to stab her.
Because I rewatched this for the first time in a few years for this podcast. When that bit happened, I just had an image of Candyman off camera, sort of giggling like.
Well, yeah,
he's like the big prankster.
See, now this is our Freddy influence here. Yeah. So we've got this idea of Candyman giggling, going, "Oh, look what I did." Yeah. But of course, that's not what Candyman would do. That's not him. That's Freddy. But because we're so sort of, at this point, especially when you're young, you'd be like, that's how our characters behave.
Yeah.
But not Candyman. This is not what he's just setting something up. Because his thing is very serious. His thing is very much about, because she's expelled the myth of Candyman. That's what she's done. So that's why he's doing this, to bring back the need for fear. Need to bring the killer back. So we're bringing it back in Helen.
Yeah, and mentioned that like the dead dog decapitated.
Yeah, it's really graphic. It's extremely graphic.
When you first got it before we recorded, I've got the Blu-rays of the films out, and you sort of interested that the first 3 movies are still 18s. A lot of movies have gone down to 15. I think possibly Candyman could if it was to get another cinema release when they actually re-certificate it.
Yeah.
But it is gory. There is a lot.
It is. I mean, maybe it deserves the 18. I'm only just saying that because the new one is 15, and I think that as well is extreme, and it is extremely gory. Maybe not as much, but very close. But doesn't have any decapitated dogs.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes a difference. And like you were saying, stolen babies.
Yeah, it's just a lot of little things add up.
Yeah.
There's some nudity in it, not sexually related nudity, but
no.
But then the scene where she is beaten up, does it suggest there's more than that?
Oh yeah. And also when she's taken into custody, she's have to do the strip search, and we see sort of like her mostly naked.
Yeah.
But again, of course, this is not sexualized. In fact, it's very. At that point, I remember when I saw it when I was young, I felt really distraught for her. Yeah. I felt like, oh my god, this is awful. What's happening to her. And it's done really well.
I remember this was a long time ago, so I'm not saying this is me now, but when I was a teenager watching horrors, it's like boobies. Yeah. In this, it wasn't like that.
No, not at all.
And not like in say Slumber Party Massacre or something like that.
Yes.
And which is a classic, and hopefully on this podcast I'll be discussing some Slumber Party Massacre 2 at some point, which I think is one of the most underrated and hilarious slashes ever made. Back to Candyman. I do want to mention one character in the movie. It's sort of almost a subplot. Her bastard of a boyfriend.
Well, it's again very important.
Husband, isn't it?
Husband.
Yeah.
They are married.
Whoa.
He is a professor at Chicago University, who also is a professor in the same field.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's a bit of jousting going on here, a bit of like professional competitiveness going on. There's another professor called Purcell that is only in one scene, but a very crucial scene because he's the one that gives us the backstory to this particular understanding of Candyman in Cabrini Green. Right? He doesn't give the name of Candyman. He still just calls him Candyman, as in doesn't give him his real name as alive, which comes in the second movie. But he is ultimately our storyteller for the living Candyman, not the supernatural.
This is something I find really interesting. The backstory is told. It's at the sort of dinner party.
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
And the guy who he looks like the world's biggest horror nerd with his tells the story. And they're all listening.
In an English accent. It's very important. I love that about it as well. It's got this gothic kind of feel to it. You know, he's this again very pompous white, English, speaking professor is all yes, this, that, I did this, I studied Candyman, I've done Candyman, all this kind of stuff.
I done that years
ago. So now I'm going to tell you the story because you know nothing, kind of thing.
But the way that's done is him being all pompous, but it's shot on her face, looking really well done. But earlier on in the movie, when they're talking about the myth, it cuts away to a scene that could be out of an 80s slasher with Ted Raimi.
This is the first time we're told about the Candyman.
And it's very interesting because when you see it visually, I think that scene's great because you do think, okay, this is going to be like a Freddy film, and then it turns, and then when it goes serious, more serious, it's just told there's no flashbacks there, but it leaves it more to the mind. Which I think works really well in contrast to
absolutely each other. It's very well crafted storytelling.
You don't, it might be a budget thing, but I think it's deliberate. You don't need to see what happened. I think you do in one of the sequels later, which I've got.
To Candyman, to him as yes, absolutely, So there are in later, which we'll get to on another podcast. There are flashbacks,
and also at this point in the film, you don't know whether that's true or not.
Absolutely.
So if you did see it, it would almost concrete that is what happened, because you could still think that this is just this bloke being a know-all.
Well, again, so going to what the premise of Candyman is about urban legends and about how urban legends are told throughout decades at different places and therefore are told differently. You know, they have similar ideas and things, but they all have their own little bits and pieces which make up whatever they are for whoever it is that's telling the story. And that's, again, very important. So this is, which will come into in the second film, which is something that I like in the second film, as an idea, but I don't think works necessarily in Candyman, because the Candyman story is so well at this point by 2020 or 19 whenever the
2021
set
in 2019.
That's right, and I think it was shot then. It took a while to come out because of COVID. I don't think that works so well just because we have such a well-established character of Candyman. But the idea that urban legends change and manifest as they do in different places is obviously true and is a great idea, I think, for a more broader horror story.
And Vivi's, I want to mention, I've written down toilet scene bees, which is my notes. But, I want to talk about the bees. I mean, this is I like that use because we're scared of bees. We've all seen My Girl. Come on.
It's just bees. I mean, bees obviously aren't something that you should be afraid of because they don't come after you. But of course, if you're in a place where they are and you're doing something that they see as a negative thing, then they'll come and sting you, and that's not nice.
And if you're Virginia Madsen, you should be afraid of them because she was allergic to them.
Right, indeed.
And I think most people who know about the film know the story of Tony Todd put in his contract that he'd get $1,000 every time he was stung, and throughout the franchise he was stung something like 20. I've seen two. One said 23, one said 26 times. Right. So he made some money out of that, and well done. Want to touch on the effects as well.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I think there's some brilliant practical effects in this. The makeup stuff looks great.
It does.
Even like not so much the horror stuff, but after she's been attacked, they do her eye up, and that looks, it heals bloody quickly actually. But that looks so realistic.
It does, yeah.
And then at the end when she's burned and.
So shall we just get to the end? Shall we?
Finale. Because. Just what the realism of the effects, I think.
Absolutely.
For a film
well, this is what sells it.
They
have to be, don't they?
Yeah.
In order for the film to be taken seriously enough,
the
effects have got to be believable enough. You know? And the storytelling at the same time with the storytelling has to be believable. And so it works because like you say, they're very well done.
So we'll get to the end because as I said, we will do spoilers, but. The fire, I'll let you, and then I'll add
so Helen's been seen as crazy, right? Killing dogs and stealing babies still missing right at this point. And so she's been put into I don't know what the word is, a facility for mentally unwell and dangerous people. And she, with the help of Candyman, escapes very quickly, finds her way back to Caprini Green and finds the child, which is basically being Candyman has been looking after and feeding, which we have a quick shot of him feeding it, which is important to show that he's not neglecting the child. It's very important. She finds him. She knows where he'd hide her because he'd be in the part of the building which has kind of been seen as almost the sanctum of where Candyman is. There's sort of lots of memorial bits of graffiti and stuff that are being put up for him, and it's in the sort of areas where have been left behind and. Obviously, horrible things have happened in the past. So she finds the baby, goes looking, I think, for Candyman. So he's see, my brain is. I haven't seen in a while, and my brain's going. She ends up the people of Caprini Green have built a bonfire. We're not really told what it's for. So this young boy Jake, who's helped out Helen in the past, says to her, "It's for the party." That's all he says. It's for the party. We don't know what the party is, what it's or when it's going to be. So it's there. It's just sitting there, and we know it's there. It's been in the film for half the movie. She ends up inside it, getting inside it, I think she's in there because that's where the baby is. So
she goes in to rescue the baby.
Right. So but this is where he was. Where the baby was the area where Candyman was hiding the baby was in that area. That's right. That's the shot you see where he's feeding the child. Right. So she hears the baby in the pie, so she goes in there to get it, gets it. The people of Caprini Green think that she is Candyman, that Candyman is in the pyre because they've seen something that looks like a hook on the side. Douse it with gasoline. Boom, up it goes. Candyman is in there, and he wants Helen to die at that point with the baby. All three of them together, they'll basically be as one, as some supernatural force to carry on with the legend. She escapes Candyman, gets out of the pyre, gets out of the fire with the child safely. Child is safe. Helen is not.
She's burnt to bits.
Burnt down, dies. And that's the end of that. Then we cut to Helen's funeral. Very small funeral, just Trevor and his new girlfriend.
What the hell is she doing there?
And a couple of other people. Then the people of Caprini Green turn up to pay homage, and one of them lets the handyman's hook.
It's a little lad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's Jake. Falls down, bangs on the coffin. Wonderful scene. Very, just pure gothic horror. Love it. Wonderful. To cut to the final scene of Trevor, the husband, who is now feeling remorse and guilt for not really being there for Helen. He misses Helen. He's having memories. We see that he's flashbacks in his mind.
He's comparing the modern young wife.
Right, he's got, who was what, like 5 years younger than Helen or something. It's not much.
Yeah, he liked him young, didn't he? This
it's not. So he is our baddie.
Yeah.
Now, this, I think, for me, is done really well. I can understand why some people might find this corny. Okay. But it is gothic horror, and there's always going to be a bit of that within it. So he's feeling remorse, sad. He's saying Helen's name. out loud
Into the mirror.
into the mirror.
Yeah.
He does this 5 times.
Yeah. Slowly though.
Slowly, absolutely.
Yeah, it's done well.
It's done in a way like some people may think it as being a bit cheesy because he's sort of going it in different. He's saying it in different kind of ways.
He's almost sobbing.
Sobbing, exactly. Feeling lots of emotion as he's saying it. Turns out the light. There's Helen from behind with the hook.
Yes.
Does him.
Yeah.
Proper, just does him.
And the last shot of the film is him cut up to bits.
New
wife walks in
with a knife.
Yeah.
That's important.
So,
She's holding a knife and screaming, and then we cut then to a shot of Muriel, I think, of Helen in Capuni Green.
Yeah.
With like flames coming out the side there, almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Beautiful as the credits roll.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Great ending.
And rating from you, I'm going to do this.
5.
5 out of 5.
100%. This is. I am a massive fan of horror movies. I've seen many horror movies throughout the decades. I like horror films throughout the decades of filmmaking. This isn't something that's just particular to this time for me. For me, this is one of the best horror films ever made. And couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah.
Basically.
For me, I have given it a letterbox score of 4.5, but that's because I have this thing. I'll change it. It is a 5-star film. It's just, you can't cut a dog's head off in a film, can it? But the overall reviews of this, I mean, I think they should be better. It's fair on Rotten Tomatoes, 79%. Fair dues. 3.7 on Letterboxd, which I suppose is still a high, but only 6.7 on IMDb. And I generally thought this would be higher, but then I suppose there is that it's a cheesy horror reaction from people, which it isn't.
Well, if people don't like horror movies. And don't like them for like the reasons that you say, like just the cheesiness of them. Yeah. Don't like those. Then you're not gonna. This is still a horror movie ultimately. Yeah. So if you don't like that about movies, then you're not gonna dig it. Yeah. Sadly.
So but so it is a classic though.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you're looking to watch the film, I mean, I assume you can pay to stream it and stuff. But there's an Arrow release, Blu-ray. Came out in 2018. There's so much on it, commentaries, lots of interviews. Well worth picking up. I wish I'd watched more of it last night as a bit of research. But it's just talking about our reactions to the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not an academic study of the films.
So let's jump to 2021 on our next episode, or a episode coming up. I don't know the order they're going to go out. We will be talking about parts 2 and 3. Yeah. But I think those two work well as kind of seen as sort of lowbrow, cheap sequels. Yeah, but
I think there's more to the second one that maybe some people give credit for. Yeah. I think it's a better film than perhaps people just think, cheesy sequel.
But it feels like, that's what I was talking about at the end of the last one. We have to talk about the end to talk about the sequels. It feels like that's set up for the next film to be about Helen. Yeah. Being the villain, but that ultimately didn't happen. So, but sadly, 2021. It's been a long time since a Candyman movie. And this one produced and co-written by Jordan Peele. He was originally attached to direct it. Clearly, I think it's a passion project for him. Clearly, a lot of people refer to it as
a Jordan Peele film. Understandably.
But it was directed by Nia DaCosta, who had 2018, so not long before this was made, done a film. I haven't seen it called Little Woods.
I heard of that.
Critically acclaimed, meant to be really good. That's the only film she'd done before that.
And she's done Marvels.
She'd done The Marvels, which heavily criticised, but I stand by as an enjoyable movie. A Marvel film at just over an hour and a half.
I know.
Amazing.
Same as this.
This is 91. And she's got a movie coming out as a project that I don't know anything about, but in 2026 scheduled is another 28 Days Later movie called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Right. Which will be, there's one coming out this year. Yeah. And then she's doing that.
Oh, right. So there's another one with her. Okay.
Which I think she's a good director from the two movies. I've seen this and The Marvels.
Yeah.
Heavily criticised for The Marvels, not so much for this. This done okay. 25 million to 77 million. So not a huge.
It's a success.
Yeah.
It's not a huge success, but it is certainly a success.
It's got a higher Rotten Tomatoes rating than the original, 84%. 5.9 on IMDb. When this came out, it was one of those films just after lockdown, so I'm not sure as many people would have gone out to see it as possibly. It was really pushed.
Oh, absolutely.
It was
one of the movies that I work, as maybe some of you know, I work in a cinema. This was one of the films that was heavily pushed to get people to come back to the cinema after lockdown.
Yeah, did you show this one?
We did not show it, but we did have it it was in the advertising reel for Pearl and Dean as one of the movies pushed by the filmmakers and people in the film to get people to come back to the cinema to see it. Not just this movie, but in general to come back to the cinema.
Yeah, it was one of the first films I saw after that. And I did enjoy it. I thought I'd seen it since the cinema, and I got the Blu-ray, which I've had. I got it as soon as it came out, and I went to re-watch the Blu-ray, but it's still sealed. Right. So I only seen it once.
Yeah.
And basically, it can work as a straight sequel 3 years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the main protagonist is Anthony McCoy.
Yeah.
The baby grown up.
Yeah, so we'll just get that out of the way, because that's told to us halfway through the film, but we'll get that out of the way. Anthony is our protagonist, our main character is the child of right. So who is the Vanessa E. Williams character? Oh, that Anne-Marie. That's her name.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie, who does feature in the film as well.
This thing, because about halfway through it's revealed. But I watched these literally back to back Saturday, and as soon as they say McCoy, if you've just seen and that's deliberate. That's for fans to know.
Right. Again, this sequel is full of stuff that are for fans of the original film.
Yeah. And so he's grown up. He's in my notes. I have written arty arseholes. So he's an artiste.
He's an artist, absolutely. A painter, I'd say mostly, but not necessarily just that. But there's some conceptual stuff going on in there too. But yes, an artist.
Yeah. Just to quickly summarise, so he's the baby grown up, and it is basically them trying to lure him into turning into
to become the new Candyman.
The new Candyman, and I'll just start. We mentioned the opening of the original. This one, when Universal comes up, I think it's Universal. So it annoyed me instantly because they're playing Candyman from Willy Wonka. Yeah, you hear that song?
Yeah,
what's that got to? What the hell was that got to do with it? Stop it!
In a creepy kind of way.
And then, but interestingly, then there's shots of the city, but from underneath.
Yeah, from underneath.
So like the reverse of the original.
That's true.
I think that's deliberate.
Absolutely.
The music kind of sounds more electronic. It's kind of
certainly homage-y, I'd say, to Philip Glass.
Yeah, but it's more. It's got more of that John Carpenter feel.
Yeah.
Which at first I warmed to it. I think throughout the film it works.
Yeah, I think it works.
And it's very atmospheric, but it gives it more of that almost more modern horror opposed to, which I suppose it is.
Yeah, sure.
And you got to think, because some of the cast crossover and stuff as well. This just come off the back of Get Out and Us, which were huge.
Yeah, Nope.
And this is before Nope.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
You're right. Absolutely, it is before Nope.
But there's so much about this movie I do like. I don't think it's perfect. Nowhere near, but very enjoyable. 90 minutes, we say, works well. It doesn't get boring, I'd say.
True.
The flashbacks are told in like silhouette puppets.
They are done in shadow puppets, which for me are the best thing in the film. They are my favourite element to the movie. I like the shadow puppets.
It works because it's still that it's a myth.
Yeah. It's storytelling. It's harkening back to old storytelling.
Yeah.
It has very much that feel of ambiguity to whoever it is that wants to tell them. Right, whoever it is that's telling the story can do, because shadow puppets are done in a kind of a very simplistic, minimal way. Love it. I love that. I think it's great. I would have loved the whole film to have been done.
Get Tim Burton involved and get Henry Sherrick, is it?
Yeah.
That was really cool. I like I don't want to go too much about the plot because we sort of done that with the first, but where this movie is at is everyone thinks Helen was this psycho.
Yeah. Well, that's the story. That's the story that's being told now.
Yeah, and but it's them learning what actually happened. So there's a lot with the first. As I mentioned earlier, Virginia Madison. You hear recordings of her voice.
Yeah.
Originally, she was supposed to be in it. I don't know if it was filmed or not, but that was cut for various reasons. So in the trailer, there's a character who isn't even in the film. So I think this was heavily changed.
Well, if she was going to be in it, it'd have to be flashbacks, right? Because or back as some spirit. Because she's dead.
But I'm not sure of the character. So I just read that there's someone looking over him. And it's either her or someone else who was there.
Right.
But that's in the trailer very briefly, not in the film. But nowadays it's all test screenings, and so who knows? It might have just been to get it down to a 90-minute.
Yeah, sure.
Which I when this was released, I think they were trying to get people back in the cinemas, and people probably didn't want to be sitting there for 3 hours. Around that time, The Irishman came out, which went straight to streaming. More or less, it got a few. But with this, the strong points. Well, first of all, negative. I don't really like many of the characters in the film. I couldn't relate. They were arty types.
Affluence. I think it's important. I do think it's important that those characters are that. I think because it's to show, we're showing the maybe another side to the coin here. I mean, we're in Perini Green again, right? So we're back now. Perini Green, like I said, was a real place. Was torn down. It's annoying that I don't know it, because obviously that would be good to know. But I'm reckoning early 2000s. I think it was torn down, and what was rebuilt in most of the area. There's some of the area that's still there, I think, but most of the area, as in nice condominiums, nice places for people with a little bit of cash to now live. And one of our Anthony and his girlfriend Brianna, that's where they live. They live in one of these new condominiums, or at least they're built in the same kind of fashion. Again, that is something which we didn't touch on, that exists as well in the first film, that Helen's apartment was originally built to be a housing project, but because of where it was built, and realised they couldn't ghettoise it, right, by cutting it off from places of a bit of wealth, they went, oh no, we can't have that. We can't have like the poor places and rich places basically being side by side. So they turned them into places that could only be afforded with people who had a lot of money. And that's a very important part of the film as well. Subtext of the film, which again exists in this movie. I have a bit of a problem with this one, only for the fact that it has the Candyman name. And it wants to be Candyman, and in the sense that it wants to be a re-understanding of Candyman. Right. It wants us to look at Candyman not from the point of view of, this is my interpretation of white creators. Right. Like you said, the original Candyman is made by a white guy. Right. Bernard Rose wrote and directed the film, and that's his understanding. That's his interpretation of this kind of character. And the makers of this one clearly want it to be not that. They want it to be the black experience. And Candyman becomes not the gothic horror tragedy. It becomes about the tragedy of the black experience in America. Which I think is a wonderful idea for a horror movie, because it's very true. It's very honest. It's great. I love it. But I don't love it as Candyman. Because Candyman is already an existing entity, which, if he was more ambiguous, right, if he didn't have the love story, which is completely removed from this new movie, is not even mentioned, in fact, really, or at least the element that is with Helen, because as far as everyone else is concerned, Helen was just, like you say, a crazy person. I understand, from the filmmaker's point of view, I understand that what they would rebut me with, yes, the idea of Candyman is open, as in with all urban legends, to the interpretation of the person that's telling them. They change over time, and I agree. But a movie still is a movie. It's not an urban legend, right? The movie has well-established, wonderful story and plot and character, and we've removed that. We've just removed it, and we've given it a completely new context, which, like I say, I think is a wonderful idea. It's brilliant. it should be its own movie for me personally.
Yeah. But I think it's trying to modern itself up, and it's trying to. It's weird because there's a lot similar, but it's so different to the first one with all these references. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I still enjoy it, and from a horror fan, it's a 15 certificate. There's some, I'm going to say it, there's some great kills in this movie.
There are.
The first one, a throat slit. My favourite death in the whole movie is you don't really see much. It's the art critic.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say
and
that.
And the camera pulls back, and you see her being thrown about. Very, very.
So we don't see Candyman. All right, so Candyman in this movie is, or the one going around doing the killings, is not our guy Candyman, also known as his real name is Daniel Robitaille. He's mentioned and spoken of in the film, but this particular Candyman is a guy called Sherman, who existed as a human being in the 1970s, was brutally killed by the police because he was a suspect in a white child being killed in the area. Turns out that the killings continued after Sherman was murdered.
Yes.
So therefore wasn't the killer.
Yeah, he was just a weird guy.
He was just a weird guy who liked giving out sweets to kids. This kind of story is a very true story. This kind of killing by the police is very accurate.
Yeah.
Right? And like I say, I think is wonderful idea for a benevolent revenge spirit that wants to come back and kill, but he's not our Candyman. Yeah. You know? He's another Candyman. I understand, I mean, I'll never obviously be able to understand the African American experience of being a white guy from Britain. Yeah. But I understand the filmmakers want for us to grapple with the idea that Candyman should be a representation for the black experience and for the need for revenge.
Yeah.
Right? And the rightful need for revenge or justice. And I do think that's made very clear at the end of the movie with the killing of the police by Anthony, who is now Candyman. That this is about about that struggle and about wanting to get a certain amount of however you want to put it, revenge, justice, whatever.
But it is creating a different Candyman.
Yes.
But it is for different reasons.
Yes.
So so the changes, I see where they work, but for you, it's not the Candyman.
It doesn't speak, because I love the story so much.
Yeah.
I don't just see the original Candyman as just another horror movie. I see it as one of the best well-told horror movies ever. That you take that and say, well, that half of the element that I think is brilliant, the wonderful gothic romance between an interracial couple, is just put aside for another great story. I find that hard for me. I can't just let that be.
I mean, I don't know, but I do think the cutscenes, because Helen was involved, there would have been some of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible, sure.
Yeah. So basically, there's a major element missing from this for you.
Yeah.
But did you still enjoy it?
I did. Yeah. I don't think it's a bad film. I think it's a bit of more of a muddled film than the original, which is interesting because a lot of people would say that about the original, that it was kind of a little bit, didn't quite fit, all the pieces all fit together, which I understand, but it's fantasy, so maybe that's okay, that things don't have to be so clear cut and make complete sense. I think this film does a lot more of that, and you saying that there's stuff that's clearly that they had but isn't in the film would make sense of that, why things feel a bit more like, things are missing.
I think they've tried very hard to make it watchable and understandable for people who hadn't seen the original film.
Right.
There's lots of people who have, especially like I said, I watched it back to back. There's loads in there, but you could, and I think a lot of people did, watch this movie thinking it was just a remake, so you don't need to have seen the others. And it was. I said to you before we started recording, I don't like when like with Halloween. There's 3 different films called Halloween.
Yeah.
I don't like a follow-on or sequel to have the same name. If it's a remake, fair dues. But for me, it just confuses everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know what they could call this. Something like a Candyman story. Well,
Candymen.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly obvious in this movie that that Candyman is not a single person. He is different people that truly horrific wrongness has been done upon them, and they've been murdered in horrific ways. by either, well, the authority of whatever it may be, whether it's the police or people of a town or whatever, have come together and ultimately lynched a black man. And this is the revenge or justice or whatever word you want to use that's come back to haunt the people that exist today. Okay. There's a character in it, important character called Burke, who is the person who tells Anthony the story and ultimately is the person that is leading Anthony to becoming the new Candyman. Yeah. I really don't like this as a plot device. A human being who's gone crazy because of his experience with Candyman as a child, who wants to bring Candyman back, feels that it's the right thing to do to bring Candyman back in order to, like say, to get justice.
Yeah. See,
I don't like this.
I like that character until the turn.
Yeah.
When you think he's trying to help him, I like that.
Right.
I like that character because he's experienced and he's telling
the
protagonist and the audience.
Yes, absolutely. I like that.
But then when it turns to his helping him, that doesn't really add up to me.
Yeah, I know.
Why would he do that?
I find it. He explains why he does it whilst he's doing it, which again I find really annoying. I said to myself I was going to write it down, but I didn't, so I can't quote it properly. But he has a line at this point which is clearly for the audience, clearly for us. Yeah. In fact, audiences of the past who love Candyman, the original, which is to say along the lines of, that people can have their own interpretations of an urban legend as they do. But certain things have to remain the same. That says when he's putting on the hook onto his hand. And he's saying that clearly, I know some of you ain't going to like this because it's not Candyman of your day, but this is our Candyman.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we get that. You don't need to tell us that. Yeah. We get that. Unless you're a moron, it's clearly obvious. It's clearly obvious.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I just want to mention this was set in 2019. They put that year up. I'm sure I read some. I've got to rewatch 2 and 3, which we'll talk about soon. Yeah. Isn't part 3 set in 2020?
Yes, it is.
So that was.
So it would be after the events of this.
So would they all work together or does it just ignore 2 and 3?
No. So this film doesn't need 2 and 3.
But it hasn't totally. They could still be in the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is the point of the filmmaker's new interpretation of Candyman.
Yeah.
That Candyman isn't about a single person. It could be. And should be anyone that is had been murdered in a wrong way and should come back and get their justice.
What I mean is it doesn't do like one of the Halloween films where a character died and then is back. So there's nothing that almost defunks those other 2 movies.
No, I wouldn't say so. Maybe some people would say that, but I don't think so.
I'll rewatch them before we do the next one anyway. Yeah. Knowing you probably will as well.
Yeah, I will.
Yes. But overall, though, I mean, what do you think of the cast, the acting in this?
Yeah, as far as filmmaking, like on a very just typical technical level, we're not talking about the story and the plot and everything else. No one in it is bad, and it's well put together.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to expect anything less from a Jordan Peele film.
Yeah.
Him and his team know how to make a well put together, competent film.
Yeah.
So who's not going to say that?
Yeah. And I think DaCosta's a good director. I really want to see her do more of her own thing because I've only seen her do. So I've got. I don't even know if the first film, Little Witch, is a horror or anything. I don't know anything about it.
No, I think it's drama.
Drama. Yeah. That's what I just quickly looking at it for this one. But she's done Marvels, which is a big franchise.
Absolutely.
And from what I hear,
huge.
She was messed about a lot in that film.
No, really.
I listened to the commentary before. Ages ago on it, and it's very we did this. She seems to have worked hard on it, quite proud of it, but there's almost stuff like it's not quite the vision she wanted.
Sure, could understand that being Marvel.
I'd recommend this film to a casual superhero.
Yeah, I saw it. It was fine.
Yeah, it was. But I think it's a well-made film as well. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I think she's a good director.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say this on a horror podcast, but I'm not a big fan of 28 Days Later. Actually, that's how I want. Anyway.
Yeah,
but when the new one comes out, if I like that, cool, there'll be another one after. But I want to see her do her own thing.
Yeah.
Because it feels like she's a very, very good, competent director, but almost turned into a hired hand.
Yeah, which I think happens a lot nowadays. I think that's not nowadays. In fact, all days. That's what happens to most directors. Yeah. It's difficult to to be as they say, an auteur, to have your own, to be able to do your own work and have your own vision.
I don't know if she even wants that, but it'd be nice to see her to do something that isn't this established thing. So that way, and she wouldn't get criticised, I think.
Maybe, but I mean, sadly, that's the majority of films we get to see nowadays are just these well-established franchises.
Maybe she wants to do big films.
Sure,
I think visually it's great. It's well paced.
Yeah,
it is enjoyable, but
I'm not in any kind of way one of these people who says to these kind of movies, right? I'm not someone that says, "Oh, here we go, people talking about race, blah blah blah." For a Jordan Peele-ish film, there isn't enough funny for me in this. He's a funny guy, Jordan Peele. Yeah. I know that it's not his film.
There's slightly more, but there is more humour in it, or attempted humour than the original.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm not sure it all works.
But this is my point. This is my thing. I think because clearly I say it's annoying that I'm saying this, but it does feel like a Jordan Peele film, and like you said, there is a feeling that there is more comedy in there. Clearly with the brother and the brother of Brianna, the girlfriend to Anthony. There are elements to it that you'll see in other Jordan Peele productions.
Yeah,
and I just don't feel that any of that works at all. And I think it feels like it's completely out of place.
Do you think it's just not aimed at us? Not just the race, but age-wise.
Yes, certainly. I think you're absolutely right with that. Sad, but Jordan Peele's our age. This is the funny thing. It's like, but people of our age do make these kind of movies. It seems now for younger people. Or that's what it feels like. The humor and stuff and things. It just doesn't feel like I'm getting it in the sense I know what they're doing. It just doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I can't tell you why necessarily. Like properly. I just and it's in all types of movies. Right, it's not just horror or whatever, or horror. It's in so many modern kind of Hollywood-y kind of films where people sort of like speak in ways. I'm like, I don't really believe this. You know what I mean? I just don't. Is this really how Americans talk now? I mean, it's like okay if it is, but I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. But overall, a rating out of 5 for this movie.
3.
3? I'd give it a 3.5, which, for my famously high ratings of everything.
Yeah,
I enjoy, and I will watch it again. It's not one that it's not a go-to like the first one, but I think you can tell it's trying really hard. That might be its problem.
I agree. I think that's very true. It clearly is trying very hard, and yet that is, I'd say, its biggest flaw.
Well, I do think as well a lot of younger people like it a lot more than us, but that's the point.
Interesting.
And it is interesting that it's done well, but it's been 3 years and 4 years now. I don't know if there's even talk of another one.
Not that I've heard of.
No, I mean, it'd be nice to see the franchise carry on, I think. But if they're going to do different Candyman and stuff, maybe the way the things go now, maybe a TV series or something. I don't know. But I thought when this was
not a bad idea.
When this was pushed, that we get another straight sequel to this. It doesn't look like it's going to happen.
No.
But I don't think the Candyman franchise should go away. But obviously with the death of Tony Todd now.
Well, certainly. Who does feature very briefly in this film at the end.
And he's digitally de-aged as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could just bring him back as CGI. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, so...
Yeah.
I hope they don't.
No. I mean, they could do it without him.
Sure.
And also with Clive Barker, is he anything to do with this new one?
Not that I know of. No.
Well, he sold the rights, didn't he? So
but and we're going to talk about it obviously in another podcast. But the second Candyman, he wrote the story and executive produced.
Yeah.
So he continued. He did continue on beyond the first film.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, he's no involvement in this one or the third one.
Yeah. So I'm just going to mention 2 facts that I meant to mention as we were going along, but totally forgot. We mentioned the character William Burke.
Yes.
And there's a big clue of what he is because that's the name of a Scottish serial killer.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yes,
you knew that.
Yeah.
You noticed it. And Virginia Madsen, if she wasn't available, do you know the actress they were going to get to play in the first one? She was pretty unknown in 92. But there was featured on the special features. They say the actress who they wanted if Madsen can. I keep saying Madsen. It's Madsen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
With Brother Michael.
Yes, legend.
Yeah. Do you know what? When you say it, I'll be like, yes, but right now I can't recall. So
it was Sandra Bullock.
yes,
Yeah,
I did know that.
Yeah,
yeah,
which could have worked.
Yes,
but
yeah, I think so.
But it's one of those. I've said it on different podcasts we've done, like King Street Cinema podcast. Everyone should listen. That actor is so linked now with this character that I couldn't see anyone else doing it. Not only couldn't.
Yeah, that's how it always works. When someone works, so well, you can't imagine other people doing it necessarily, and rightfully so, because they would do it differently. Maybe as well. Maybe they would do it justice, but it would be different.
Yeah. So that sort of. I said the ratings of the new one 5.9 and 84%. Yeah, I did say because it got higher.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining. We'll be talking very soon about Candyman 2 and 3, which more movies that this podcast is going to dwell on. The lesser known horror films.
Sure.
But that are enjoyable. And I want to get the word out about films like this because both of the movies, 2 and 3, are available on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
The second one on 88 Films, who were known for doing
a lot of horror, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of special features.
Retrospective stuff.
Yeah, and the third one only got released a year or so ago.
Lionsgate, is it?
Yes, it is, and loads of extra stuff on that. And I watched this when I first got it. And I'm looking forward to watching it because I thought, I hate to say it, I thought it'd be rubbish, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to do it at that time, but I will just a little spoiler for the future. I did enjoy both 2 and 3.
Yeah, and I didn't think you would, so that's kind of why I should do it. So we'll be back talking about those soon. Thank you all very much for listening, and follow us on the socials and stuff.
Yeah.
Candyman. Okay, so I really enjoyed that. Good to get James on the show. As I say, the second part will be out in a week or so. I just want to very quickly now, because that went on a bit longer than I thought. I was aiming to get each of these episodes to about an hour, but we were enthusiastic and enjoyed it. So tough. I'm going to do my top 5 horror movies seen in the cinema so far this year. One thing I do love is just getting out and going to the cinema. And most of the movies I'll be talking about in depth on this podcast will be older ones watched on streaming or DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. So, but I do every now and then want to mention newer movies. So I'm just going to quickly go over 5 horror films I've seen in the last, 6 weeks on the big screen. At number 5, The Damned. This is a folk horror. It's kind of crept out. Well made, probably be on streaming fairly soon, but I can see why it kind of went under the radar. It does feel like something made for sort of Shudder or something like that, but still quite enjoyable. Number 4, the first of the ones I really recommend, Steven Soderbergh, who's a director mostly known for sort of bigger budget films. He's done the Oceans movies, things like that. A ghost story called The Presence, which I thought was really cool. Shot from the ghost point of view about a family moving in to the house that it dwells. And it's short, but it sort of evolves slowly, if that makes sense. Something different. It went in ways I didn't think it would go, which was pretty cool. So Presence I definitely recommend. This one will be all right on the smaller screen because the way it's shot, it looks a bit Paranormal Activity, but not quite so CCTV, if you know what I mean. And number 3, this movie bombed. A lot of people are slating it, but I actually really enjoyed it. Wolfman, which is kind of a reboot of the Universal. They're saying it's a reboot of the Universal Studios classic, but it is very different. The same director done The Invisible Man a few years ago, which was a big hit. This one bombed. I just don't think people are getting it. And I get why they're not getting it, because it's not your typical werewolf movie. There's no transformation scene. It happens slowly. It's more of a body horror. If you go in not expecting a traditional werewolf movie and sort of, go in wanting a body horror or something a bit more, it focuses on trauma, that sort of thing. I thought it was really good, but it's not for everybody, and it's not the film that I think it's been sold as. So maybe that's another reason it's not done so well. But do check it out. Number 2, a movie that has done well and is still showing. It was actually released in America on Christmas Day, and I think it came out here New Year's Day or maybe New Year's Eve. Nosferatu. This is Mr. Eggers, who done The Lighthouse and The Witch, and more recently Northman. This has done the business. Great cast, really well made, and as remakes go, considering it's a remake of a film over 100 years old, it's kind of quite faithful to the original, but taken in different directions. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I might actually do a comparison between this and the original. Same with The Wolfman, actually, at some point. I wrote loads of notes and thought, well, I can do that on this, the first show. But I thought, no, we've focused a lot on Candyman, so I'll just sort of summarise it. And at number 1 in my favourite horrors so far this year, in the very short year it's been so far, Companion, directed by Drew Hancock, starring Jack Quaid and so many other sort of up-and-coming actors in the horror genre. Then this, can't say much. It's full of twists and turns. There's a massive twist 20 minutes in. Really well made. It's a 15 certificate, but the gore comes thick and fast as well. Get yourselves to see this one. And this being a horror and sci-fi show, there's elements for fans of both there. I do tend to sway towards the horror a bit more, but I have got coming up there. Next episode is the second part of the Candyman franchise. Then after that, I'm going to be comparing the 1960 and 2002 versions of The Time Machine based on the novel, which was written in 1885. Ian Pointer is going to be joining me on that one. Ian actually designed the logo that you'll see for the show. So he's actually helped out a lot with the show, just in conversations we've had about what to do and whatever. And he'll be having his own podcast soon as well, which once it's up and running, I'll be giving a plug and making sure you're listening to that as well. Just want to thank again James for guesting with me, and he's going to be on the next show as well. And another James Howard, or he's also known as Talking Sleeve, who you can find on your music pages and stuff. He done the theme and little interludes on the show as well. So big thanks to both Jameses there, and get yourselves to King Street Cinema to see that James in person, and follow the Talking Sleeve on the music pages. Join us very soon for part 2 of this Candyman little special. Thank you all very much for listening. Do find us we're on Facebook and Instagram, and if you're on Blue Sky, I'm on there with basically a podcast and radio page for everything I do. Just Andy Martin, Andy with a double E, then Martin, Martin. Thank you all very much, and we'll be returning from the grave and the stars very soon.